Widow and her 4 children are forced out in the rain, but a stranger on the road changes everything. The rain had been falling since early morning, slow at first, then heavier, as if the sky itself was tired of holding back. Dark clouds covered the small neighborhood where the widow lived with her 4 children. The house was not big or beautiful, but it had been their shelter, their only safe place after her husband passed away. That morning, however, it no longer felt like home. The widow stood near the doorway, holding a thin shawl tightly around her shoulders. Her name did not matter as much as her situation. She was a woman who had learned to live quietly, to work hard, and to carry pain without complaint. Since her husband's death, life had become a daily struggle. Every rupee was counted. Every meal was carefully planned. Still, she had tried her best to protect her children from the harsh truth of their condition. Her 4 children stood close to her, confused and frightened. The oldest, a boy barely in his early teens, tried to look strong, but his eyes kept drifting toward the strangers standing near their belongings. The second child, a girl with tired eyes, held her younger siblings' hands, as if that alone could keep them safe. The 2 youngest did not fully understand what was happening. They only knew that their mother looked worried and that strangers were touching their things. The landlord stood a short distance away, his face cold and distant. He had come with 2 men to remove the widow and her children from the house. There was no anger in his voice, only impatience. He spoke about unpaid rent, about rules, about deadlines that had already passed. The widow tried to explain once again that she only needed a little more time. She promised she would find work, promised she would pay everything back. Her voice shook, not from fear alone, but from exhaustion. The landlord did not listen. He had heard enough. Without raising his voice, he ordered the men to take their belongings outside. One by one, the few items the family owned were placed on the muddy ground. A thin mattress, a small suitcase with clothes, a broken chair, and a bag filled with old books. Each item carried memories of better days, of a life that once felt complete. The rain grew heavier. Water soaked into the clothes piled outside, and mud splashed onto everything. The widow watched silently, her heart breaking with every second. She felt as if she was being erased, pushed out not just from the house but from the world itself. Neighbors peeked through windows and doors, whispering among themselves. Some felt sorry, others looked away, afraid that helping her might bring trouble into their own lives. The children began to cry softly. The youngest shivered from the cold, his small shoes already wet. The widow knelt down and wrapped her shawl around him, even though it left her shoulders bare. She did not care about herself. Her only concern was her children. She wiped their tears and told them everything would be fine, even though she did not know how. When the landlord finally left, the house stood empty behind him, its door closed as if it had never belonged to them. The widow stood still for a long moment, staring at the door. That house had been the last place where she had heard her husband's voice, where her children had laughed freely. Now it was gone. She took a deep breath and looked at the sky. Rainwater ran down her face, mixing with silent tears. She did not allow herself to cry loudly. She had learned that crying did not change anything. Strength, even forced strength, was the only option left. Slowly, she gathered what she could. She placed clothes into the suitcase, tied the bag of books, and helped her children put on what little dry clothing they had. There was no one to help her carry the load. Every neighbor had disappeared back into their homes. The street felt empty, even though people lived all around. With no destination in mind, she picked up the suitcase and told her children to stay close. They began walking down the road together, leaving behind the only place they had known as home. The rain followed them, heavy and unforgiving. Water filled the cracks in the road and their feet splashed with every step. As they walked, memories flooded the widow's mind. She remembered the day her husband died, how suddenly life had changed. He had been a hardworking man, full of dreams for their children. His death left more than emotional pain. It left unpaid bills, unfinished plans, and a responsibility that now rested fully on her shoulders. She had tried everything since then. She worked wherever she could, cleaned houses, washed dishes, stitched clothes late into the night. Still, it was never enough. Every time she felt close to stability, something else would go wrong. The world did not slow down for her grief. The children walked silently for a while. The oldest boy kept looking around, perhaps hoping to recognize a familiar face. The girl tightened her grip on her siblings' hands whenever thunder echoed in the distance. The younger ones grew tired quickly. Their small legs struggled to keep up, but they did not complain. Somewhere deep inside, they sensed that this was not the time to ask questions. Cars passed by on the road, splashing water as they went. Some drivers glanced at the family, then looked away. Others did not notice them at all. To the world, they were just another group of people walking in the rain. No one knew their story. No one knew what they had lost that day. The widow's arms ached from carrying the suitcase, but she refused to stop. Stopping felt dangerous, like admitting defeat. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she could not go back. With every step, fear grew heavier in her chest. What would happen when night came? Where would they sleep? How would she feed them? She remembered her husband's voice, calm and steady, telling her that life would test them, but they must never give up. Those words became her only comfort. She repeated them silently, like a prayer, with every step she took. After walking for a long time, the children grew weaker. The youngest began to cry loudly now, unable to hold back his hunger and cold. The widow stopped under a large tree by the side of the road. Its thick branches offered little protection, but it was better than nothing. She placed the suitcase down and gathered her children close. She hugged them tightly, trying to warm them with her own body. Her clothes were soaked, her hair stuck to her face, but she did not care. She whispered comforting words, promising that she would find a way. Inside, however, she felt more alone than ever before. The road stretched endlessly ahead of them, wet and empty. The rain showed no sign of stopping. The widow closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. She did not ask for wealth or comfort. She only wished for safety for her children, for one small chance to stand again. At that moment, she did not know that this road, which felt like the end of everything, was also leading her toward a change she could never have imagined. But for now, all she could see was the rain, the road, and the responsibility she carried with every breath she took. The rain did not stop. It continued to fall as if the sky had decided to follow the widow and her children wherever they went. Water soaked into the ground, turning the roadside into thick mud. The tree under which they stood offered little comfort. The widow looked at her children's tired faces and knew she could not stay there for long. She lifted the suitcase again, though her arms felt weak. Her body was tired, but her heart forced her to move. She told the children gently that they had to keep walking. The oldest boy nodded without saying a word. He picked up the small bag of books to help his mother, even though it slowed him down. The girl held the hands of the younger ones, guiding them carefully so they would not slip. Each step felt heavier than the last. The widow's clothes clung to her skin, cold and uncomfortable. Her feet were sore, but she did not look down. She was afraid that if she did, she might lose the strength to move forward. Instead, she kept her eyes on the road ahead, hoping it would lead them somewhere safe. As they walked, her mind filled with thoughts she tried hard to push away. She wondered if she had failed as a mother. She had promised her husband, before he passed away, that she would take care of their children no matter what. Now, they had no home, no shelter, and no clear future. The thought made her chest feel tight, but she did not let the children see her pain. The youngest child began to slow down. His small legs trembled and he stumbled more than once. The widow noticed and quickly picked him up in her arms. Though he was heavy and her strength was fading, she did not complain. She kissed his wet hair and whispered softly that everything would be okay. He rested his head on her shoulder, trusting her completely. The road seemed endless. Shops were closed because of the rain. Streetlights flickered weakly, already turning on even though it was still early evening. Darkness was coming faster than she expected. Fear quietly settled in her heart. Night was always harder, especially for a woman alone with children. They passed a small bus stop, empty and wet. For a moment the widow thought about stopping there, but it was open on all sides. The wind blew cold rain into the space. It was not safe. She kept walking. Cars passed by again. Some slowed down for the puddles, splashing water onto the side of the road. The widow turned her body slightly to protect the children from the water. No one stopped. No one asked if they needed help. With every passing car, her hope grew thinner. The girl looked up at her mother and asked quietly where they were going. The widow paused. She did not want to lie, but she did not want to scare her either. She told her they were going to find a place to rest for the night. The girl nodded, though her eyes showed doubt. She had grown up too fast in the past few years. The widow remembered how different life had once been. She remembered evenings when her husband would come home tired but smiling. They would eat together, talk about the children's school, and laugh at small things. Back then, she never imagined she would be walking on a wet road with nowhere to go. She blamed herself sometimes. Maybe she should have asked for help earlier. Maybe she should have left the house sooner, but regret did not help now. All that mattered was getting through this moment. The rain softened a little, but the cold remained. The children's clothes were soaked, and their teeth began to chatter. The widow felt helpless. She had no extra clothes, no money to buy food, and no phone to call for help. She had already used what little she had to survive the past few days. They reached a quieter part of the road. Fewer cars passed here. On one side were fields covered in water, shining under the weak streetlights. On the other side were a few small buildings, mostly dark and closed. The silence made the widow nervous, but it was better than standing in the open rain. She stopped again, placing the suitcase down carefully. Her arms felt numb. She looked at her children and forced a small smile. She told them to sit close together. She wrapped her arms around them, pulling them into a tight circle. She rubbed their backs, trying to warm them. Inside, her heart was heavy. She felt invisible. It seemed like the world had moved on without noticing them. Still, she refused to give up. She told herself that she had survived worse days. She had survived the loss of her husband. She could survive this too. The oldest boy looked at his mother and asked if she was tired. The question broke her heart. She wanted to tell him that everything was fine, but she also wanted to be honest. She told him she was tired, but she was strong. She told him that families stay strong together. He nodded and sat a little straighter, as if trying to share her burden. Time passed slowly. The rain returned, heavier than before. The widow felt panic rise again. She did not know how long they could stay there. The children needed food and sleep. She closed her eyes briefly and whispered a quiet prayer, asking for guidance and strength. She thought about asking strangers for help, but fear stopped her. She had heard too many stories. She had learned to be careful. Trust did not come easily anymore. Still, she knew she could not handle everything alone. After a while, she decided they had to keep moving. Staying still made the cold worse. She lifted the suitcase again and told the children to stand up. The youngest protested softly, too tired to walk. She held him close and continued forward. As they walked, the widow noticed how the rain made everything shine. The road reflected the streetlights, creating long lines of light on the ground. For a brief moment, she thought about how strange life was. Even in pain, there was beauty. Even in darkness, there was light. That thought gave her a small sense of calm. The children grew quieter. Their voices faded into soft breaths and small coughs. They were exhausted. The widow worried they might get sick, but she had no medicine, no shelter. Fear returned stronger than before. She wondered if her husband could see them somehow. She hoped he would be proud of her for not giving up. She hoped he would forgive her for moments of weakness. Suddenly, she heard the sound of a vehicle slowing down behind them. Her heart skipped a beat. She tightened her grip on her children and turned slightly, ready to protect them if needed. The vehicle slowed even more, then stopped a short distance away. She did not turn around immediately. Fear and uncertainty held her still. The rain filled the silence. She could hear her own heartbeat. Part of her wanted to run. Another part wanted to hope. She slowly turned her head. A car stood on the side of the road, its lights glowing softly through the rain. The engine was still running. For a moment, nothing happened. The widow felt torn. She did not know whether this was danger or help. She looked at her children, then back at the car. Her mind raced with questions. Should she trust this moment? Should she walk away? She took a small step forward, still unsure. Whatever happened next would change everything. But at that moment, all she knew was that she had reached a point where she could not continue alone. The road behind her held only loss. The road ahead held uncertainty. And somewhere between the rain and the silence, her fate waited to unfold. The widow stood still as the car remained stopped on the side of the road. The rain continued to fall, tapping softly against the roof of the vehicle. For a few long seconds, nothing happened. Her heart beat fast and her thoughts became heavy. She held her children closer, her body moving in front of them without thinking, as if she could shield them from anything that might come. Then the driver's door slowly opened. A man stepped out, holding an umbrella. He was not young, but not old either. His clothes were simple, clean, and suitable for the weather. He did not rush toward them. Instead, he stayed a few steps away, keeping a respectful distance. His face showed concern, not curiosity. The widow watched him carefully. She had learned to read people's expressions since her husband passed away. She knew how to notice danger, how to sense false kindness. This man's eyes looked calm. Still, fear did not leave her heart. The man spoke gently, his voice almost lost in the sound of the rain. He asked if they were all right and if they needed help. The widow did not answer immediately. Her children looked up at her, waiting for her response. The oldest boy's eyes were sharp, watching the stranger closely. She finally spoke, her voice quiet and tired. She said they were fine, even though it was clear they were not. The man nodded slowly, as if he understood that trust did not come easily. He did not push. He only said that it was late, the weather was bad, and children should not be out in such conditions. The widow felt tears rise in her eyes, but she forced them back. She did not want to appear weak. She told him they had nowhere to go for the night. Saying those words out loud made her pain feel real. The man listened without interrupting. He then offered them shelter for the night. He said he had a small guest room at his place, nothing fancy but warm and dry. He promised that he would not ask for anything in return. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully, as if he did not want to scare her. The widow's heart was filled with conflict. Part of her wanted to say no and walk away. She had survived this far on her own. But another part of her, the part that was cold, tired, and afraid for her children, knew she had no better option. The children were shaking from the cold. The youngest was half asleep in her arms. She looked into the man's eyes again. She searched for something, anything that would help her decide. She thought about the road ahead, about the darkness and the rain. She thought about her children sleeping outside. Slowly, she nodded. The man seemed relieved but did not show it too strongly. He opened the back door of the car and helped them get inside. He placed the suitcase carefully in the trunk, making sure nothing was damaged. The widow noticed how gently he handled their few belongings, and it eased her heart a little. Inside the car, it was warm. The children sighed softly as the heat touched their cold skin. The youngest fell asleep almost immediately. The widow held him close, her arms finally relaxing. For the first time that day, she felt a small sense of safety. The drive was quiet. The man did not ask many questions. He only asked their names and if the children were hungry. When the widow nodded, embarrassed, he said there would be food waiting for them. She thanked him softly, her voice filled with emotion. As they drove, the widow looked out the window at the rain-covered streets. Lights passed by slowly. She felt like she was leaving one life behind and entering another unknown chapter. Fear was still there, but so was a small spark of hope. They arrived at a modest house on a quiet street. It was not large, but it looked welcoming. The man parked the car and quickly opened the door for them, holding the umbrella over the children as they stepped out. The widow noticed how careful he was, making sure they did not slip. Inside the house, warmth surrounded them. The air smelled clean and comforting. The man showed them a small room with clean blankets and dry towels. He told them to dry themselves and rest. He said they could talk later when they felt better. The widow thanked him again, her voice shaking. She helped the children change into dry clothes that the man had brought for them. They were simple clothes, but clean and warm. The children looked at her with relief in their eyes. The girl smiled for the first time that day. After a short while, the man brought them food. It was simple, warm, and filling. The children ate quietly at first, then with more energy. The widow watched them closely. Seeing them eat brought tears to her eyes again. She turned away, wiping her face quickly. The man did not sit with them. He gave them space. He told them they were safe and that they could rest as long as they needed. There was no pressure in his voice, no hidden demand, only kindness. That night, after the children fell asleep, the widow sat quietly on the edge of the bed. Her body was tired, but her mind was awake. She thought about how close she had been to losing hope. She thought about how one moment on a dark road had changed everything. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. She did not know how long this help would last. But for the first time since her husband's death, she allowed herself to breathe freely. In the silence of the warm room, with her children sleeping safely beside her, she realized something important. Sometimes, help comes when a person is at their weakest. Sometimes, a stranger can become the reason to believe again. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside that small house, there was peace. The widow closed her eyes, holding onto that feeling, knowing that this night would stay with her forever. Morning light entered the small room softly, touching the widow's face and the peaceful expressions of her children. For a few seconds after waking up, she felt confused. The warmth, the silence, and the dry clothes felt unfamiliar. Then memories of the rainy road returned to her mind, and she realized where she was. Her heart filled with gratitude and also a little fear. She did not want to stay too long. She did not want to become a burden. She sat up slowly so she would not wake the children. They were sleeping deeply, their bodies relaxed for the first time in days. She watched them for a moment, feeling thankful that they were safe. Outside the room, she could hear quiet sounds of movement in the house, gentle and calm. After a while, she helped the children wake up. They stretched and rubbed their eyes, looking around with curiosity. The girl asked softly where they were. The widow smiled and told them they were in a safe place for now. She reminded them to behave well and to thank the man who had helped them. They stepped out of the room carefully. The man was already awake, preparing a simple breakfast in the kitchen. When he saw them, he greeted them kindly, as if they were guests he had known for a long time. He did not make them feel uncomfortable or unwanted. They sat together at the table. The children ate quietly but happily. The widow noticed color returning to their faces. That small change filled her heart with relief. She thanked the man again, this time more firmly, and told him she would leave soon and find another place. The man listened carefully and shook his head gently. He told her there was no rush. He said the weather was still bad and that the children needed rest. He added that she should take a few days to think clearly before making decisions. His words were calm and respectful, not demanding. The widow felt tears rise again, but this time they were not only from pain. They were from relief. She nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Over the next few days, life moved slowly but steadily. The rain stopped and the sky cleared. The widow helped around the house, cleaning and cooking when she could. She did not want to sit idle. She believed dignity came from effort, even in difficult times. The man noticed her willingness to help and respected it. He never treated her like someone helpless. Instead, he spoke to her as an equal. They talked in the evenings after the children fell asleep. She shared her story little by little. She spoke about her husband, her struggle, and her fear of the future. The man listened quietly, never judging, never interrupting. He shared his own story too. He spoke about loneliness, about losing family, about learning that helping others sometimes helped heal one's own wounds. Their conversations were simple, but meaningful. One afternoon, the man told her about a small job opportunity nearby. A local family needed help with daily work. It was not much, but it was honest work. The widow felt nervous but hopeful. She agreed to try. The first day she went to work, her hands trembled. It had been a long time since she felt this close to stability. She worked carefully, giving her best effort. When she returned that evening, tired but proud, her children ran to her with smiles. That moment reminded her why she had never given up. Days turned into weeks. The widow continued working. The children began attending a nearby school. At first, they were shy and quiet, but slowly they started to adjust. The girl made a friend. The oldest boy began to help younger students. The younger ones laughed more often. The widow watched these changes with a heart full of emotion. She still worried about the future, but the fear no longer controlled her. She was learning to hope again. The man never asked her to leave, but he also never made promises that felt too large. He simply offered support where he could. He helped her save money. He guided her when she felt lost. He reminded her that strength did not mean never needing help. One evening, the widow sat alone, thinking about how far they had come since that rainy night. She realized that accepting help had not made her weak. It had allowed her to stand again. She felt grateful, not only to the man, but to life itself for giving her another chance. She knew there was still a long road ahead. Challenges would return. Life would test her again. But she also knew she was no longer alone in the world. As she watched her children sleeping peacefully that night, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because she believed in tomorrow. The road that once brought her fear had now led her to growth. And deep inside, she understood that this chapter of her life was not about loss anymore. It was about rebuilding, one day at a time. Time continued to move forward, quietly but steadily. The widow's life no longer felt frozen in pain like it once had. Each morning, she woke up with purpose. She prepared her children for school, packed their small lunches, and watched them walk out the door with hope in their eyes. That sight alone gave her strength for the entire day. Her work slowly became more stable. The family she worked for trusted her and appreciated her honesty and effort. They spoke kindly to her and paid her fairly. For the first time in a long while, she could plan small things without fear. She could buy fresh food without counting every coin again and again. She could replace worn clothes for her children. These simple things felt like victories. The children continued to grow and change. The oldest boy became more confident and responsible. He helped his younger siblings with their homework and often reminded them to be thankful. The girl discovered she loved reading and spent evenings lost in books borrowed from school. The younger children laughed freely now, their fear slowly fading into memory. The widow noticed these changes with quiet joy. She still carried sadness for her husband, but it no longer crushed her heart. Instead, his memory became a source of strength. She believed he would be proud of how far they had come. The man who had helped them from the beginning remained a steady presence in their lives. He never tried to control or direct her choices. He respected her independence and admired her strength. Their conversations continued, full of understanding and calm. There was no pressure, only trust that grew naturally over time. One evening, as they sat together after dinner, the widow spoke about the rainy night again. She told him how close she had been to giving up. She admitted that she had felt invisible, forgotten by the world. The man listened quietly and then said something that stayed with her forever. He said that sometimes people are tested not to break them, but to show them how strong they already are. Those words settled deep in her heart. Months passed. The widow saved enough money to rent a small place of her own. It was not large or perfect, but it was theirs. The day she moved in with her children, she stood at the doorway for a long moment. She remembered standing outside another door in the rain, feeling helpless. This time she felt proud. The children ran inside, laughing and exploring every corner. The widow closed her eyes briefly, holding back tears, not tears of pain but of gratitude. She invited the man to visit. When he saw the home, his eyes filled with quiet happiness. He told her she had built something beautiful, not just a house, but a life. She thanked him, knowing that without his kindness, none of this would have been possible. Life did not suddenly become easy. There were still hard days, moments of worry, and nights when fear returned quietly. But the widow now faced those moments with confidence. She had learned that asking for help did not mean losing dignity. She had learned that kindness could appear in unexpected places. One afternoon, as rain began to fall gently outside her window, the widow sat with her children and shared their story. She told them about the road, the rain, and the stranger who helped them. She told them never to lose hope, even when life feels unfair. She told them to be kind because kindness can change someone's entire future. The children listened closely, understanding more than she expected. As the rain continued outside, the widow smiled softly. Rain no longer frightened her. It reminded her of how far they had come. The road that once felt like the end had become the beginning. And as she looked toward the future, she knew that no matter what challenges came, she and her children would walk forward together, stronger, hopeful, and grateful for the stranger who changed everything.